Okay, I have another slant on this, and you probably already designed it yourself. Sometimes I think you're right inside my head. I am. She reached out and placed her fingertips on his hands. Alan, continue what you're doing with the store. Make it the place you talked about when we were at the train station. Stock it the way you want. Get on the web. Show people how to get up here on the train. Oh, Soonie, that was just the pontificating of a dreamer. Dreamers change the world. Without dreamers, we wouldn't go anywhere. We're in 2008, just before the crash. Alan Sacket is an up-and-coming business buyer who's running up his tab personally and professionally. He has an acute business sense, but he likes to spend money and go into debt. He's got an unreal portfolio, heavily in debt, heavily mortgaged, and right before the 2008 crash, it's a potential bombshell. He drives a Mazda MX-5 Miata. He has a Cadillac SUV parked near the beach, but his debts are mounting and mounting and mounting. But with the money coming in and the investments paying off, why should he worry? He's in line to become VP of sales for 850 Lamberts department stores throughout the West, maybe even the East Coast. His friend Brian alerts him to the fact that many people have taken out mortgages without being able to pay. He tells Alan it's a bubble. He had a virtual dinner the night before with his compadre, his lover, and his friend Melinda. In the midst of it all, he gets a call from Barclay, Idaho, a place he hasn't been to since he was 10 years old. An attorney, Charles McGowan, is calling from Barclay, telling Alan that he has inherited his Aunt Amanda's general store. He thinks back when he was 10 years old, that one summer, with the little girl named Soonie, his friend. As he walks into Nate Archer's office, he thinks of baseball cards and lazy summer days up in Idaho in Coeur d'Alene. McGowan calls again. He needs to settle Alan's aunt's estate. Alan has a 20% increase in sales, but as he's talking and presenting his portfolio again to Nate Archer, Archer tells him that the market is falling. And just a few minutes later, with all his mounting debts and crashing investments, Alan Sacket is fired. He heads on a puddle jumper out to Palm Springs. He conducts business as usual, all because of Melinda. He makes a call to Nick Conte, his corporate lawyer. Waiting for him in the room is an upgraded laptop, a present from Melinda. His broker, Ralph, tells him that the crash has cost him everything. He owes 10 times the $100,000 left in his account. Then Nick Conte calls back. Alan tells Nick that with a 20% increase, how can they possibly fire him? Nick responds by saying, when you do a good job, you don't get fired. Alan's debts total up to close to $1 million. Nick Conte tells him to ask Melinda for money, but Alan doesn't even want to tell her what's happened. He begins emailing out resumes around the country. Melinda arrives after having liquidated all her assets before the crash. She's so analytical. As he soaks in the bubble bath with Melinda, she tells him about the business forecast. Gray Bar International calls. Then she finds out that he's been fired. She comes down on him hard, accuses him of incompetence. Again, he's thinking back to Barclay, the Rexall store, the sporting goods and toy store, the mobile station at the corner. Melinda leaves the hotel and disappears. Alan calls his friend Brian. Brian suggests a loan shark named Roscoe. As the weeks go by, Alan can't even pay his cell bill. The credit card companies are hounding him. The Nuevo, where he was staying, is now demanding money for back rent. Nick Conte might be able to file a lawsuit and get more money only if he holds out, but Alan needs money now. He looks at Roscoe's number given to him by Brian. He slowly dials the number. He gets a recorded message and hangs up the phone. McGowan calls again and reads a note written by Aunt Amanda to Alan. She's leaving the store to him, and she wants him to recapture that summer that he lost when he was 10 years old. Alan next leaves a voicemail at Melinda's condo. Her voicemail has changed. Roscoe gets back to him. He'll give him $250,000, and that's it. And he tells him, you don't miss deadlines with us, Sacket. He is to meet Roscoe at 2:45 a.m. in a seedy area of North Hollywood. Roscoe arrives, dressed nicely in an expensive suit. He takes the $250,000 from a fanny pack. His compadres are around him with automatic weapons, and he tells Alan, "You screw up, Sacket, they'll kill you, and do whatever you have to do to get your money." He has to pay $6,000 a month to Roscoe. Alan flies up north, knowing he'll use the sale of Aunt Amanda's store to generate more money. He hires a driver to bring him up from the Boise airport. Barclay is 3 hours north of Boise in Coeur d'Alene, an area filled with lakes and hills and mountains, a beautiful idyllic setting that hasn't changed much, looks the same as it did when he was a kid. He thought about that summer. Everything was possible during that summer. Such an innocent time. As they approach the windswept lake and ridge, he sees the town has lost its fervor. Aunt Amanda's store is now faded red, and some of the buildings look run down. McGowan's office is in the center of town. McGowan tells him that International Circuits left a few years ago, how his old friend Kenny Baines had fought with everyone else. Alan is anxious to sell the store and leave Barclay, but McGowan tells him to sit down and take it easy. He stays at Mrs. Pillsbury's rooming house. She used to be Nora Pratt, now she's Nora Pillsbury. She tells Alan that she knew that boy would come back here someday. With International Circuits closing a few years back, it killed all the sales in Aunt Amanda's store. Just another notch against how things used to be. They say you can't go back, but you can. Jacob Rothstein is a professor from Princeton and meets Alan reading on the porch of Nora Pillsbury's rooming house. Alan heads to a baseball game, played live and not on a television tube. He thinks about Aunt Amanda's store when it was busy, how Uncle Ned used to unload the farm supplies. As he watches the baseball game, a young kid wants to pass the baseball. His dad is late. A motorcycle arrives and a heavy guy in a belly-round t-shirt started yelling at Ben, who is scared, takes the kid away on the bike. At the baseball game, he meets the local cop, who they called Georgie Porgy when Alan was 10 years old. Kenny Baines is now the bank president. He married McGowan's daughter, Jill McGowan. Back at the rooming house, Jacob talks about how the town once was vital, how there was a silver strike. He finally makes it out to the store. Holding down the fort is Mrs. Hennessy, somebody he doesn't remember, but who has a very cynical outlook on life, but is rather amusing. When Soonie arrives at the store, Alan can't believe it. She says that was one great summer, and now the town is just remnants of puzzle pieces of what used to be. Alan finds out at that time that the kid that he passed the baseball with at the park is Ben, Soonie's son. And she's married to a ruffian named Tug who drove away on the motorcycle with her son. Alan soon finds that steady jobs and incomes are needed to revitalize the town. As Alan waits for a call from Nick Conti, he sits at the old counter at the pharmacy. Albert, now older with white hair, mixes a vanilla milkshake for Alan. Alan notices all the historical houses around Barclay. He's invited to come to a meeting to talk about the town's problems. He walks down Main Street, wondering just what happened to this town. Soonie invites him over to her house for dinner. Nora lets him take some flowers from her garden to bring to Soonie. Like a first date, Alan is slightly nervous, but he has a fixed image of Tug on the motorcycle. Again, he looks around the town. The town needs a shot in the arm. At Hillside Ave, he enters the house and smells a fully cooked roast. Soonie is in the kitchen with a white apron. Ben from the baseball field and his sister, Amanda. Alan helps her with the dishes later. Tug arrives later on his motorcycle. He's crude and takes the remote TV from Soonie's mother and remains belligerent with the children throughout the night. The next day, the local real estate guy, Hershey, brings in a client, the lady that used to own the toy store, Mrs. Ellis. Alan listens to his nonsense with Mrs. Ellis and finally tells Hershey it takes more than a price to win a steady customer. Back at the rotary phone, he dials Brian in L.A. Melinda's been looking for him, but Brian gets bored and hangs up. The mighty freight train still passes through Barclay, and he listens to the bells in the distance as the cars stop at the station. The empty, decrepit station was just a shadow of its once former lavish self. Without the plant, the whole town was ruined. Soonie, in her blue truck, arrives at the store. She stood even with his shoulders. Alan is thinking more about the station and the store. He looks at all the spray paint on the once fine oak moldings. He feels warm, nurturing feelings around Soonie. It was as if they had both lost something special that could only be rekindled by their touch. Then he tells her what he'd do to revitalize his aunt's store, how he'd repaint it, bring in an old photograph, old clocks, all kinds of merchandise to sell to people. Soonie mentions how, when she was 13 years old, she listened to records in her family's cabin on a Victrola. Alan tells her he knows how to buy, and he'd use ads in the World Wide Web to bring in people. As time goes by and the deadline toward Roscoe nears, Alan begins running and stays in shape by running around the hills of Barclay. He even paints the store and becomes involved with Soonie's family, especially Amanda, and he goes to Ben's ball games. Alan was painting at the end of the day. Soonie beeps the horn and arrives with the kids and a pot full of spaghetti. Alan later gets Brian on the phone. Roscoe is calling him, wanting to know about the money that Alan owes. They make arrangements to go over to the cabin on the island, cross the lake and fall with Kenny and Soonie. Soonie's mother, Melba, talks about the island. The only good thing that Tug ever did was to build the A-frame on the island. They play some of the old Foxtrot records. It's at that time that he tells Soonie how he's been downsized with Lamberts. She tells him they used to have an IC fund for international circuits, trying to get the company working again, but they left Barclay and went overseas. Soonie seems to see in Alan somebody with a vision and tells him that dreamers can change the world. Alan and Ben go fishing. Ben runs back across the island as Alan brings the boat around to the cabin. Hamburgers were sizzling on the grill, but nobody was there. There was a commotion in the woods ahead, and somebody is wailing in pain. Ben's leg has been ensnared by a sawtooth trap. Alan springs into action with tape, cloth, and hot water, and they call the fire department. They lift Ben onto a makeshift stretcher with sticks, and he and Kenny bring Ben down to the water's edge for the fire department. Tug has been trapping out there. Soonie tells him that Tug has made their life hell. The operation at the hospital is successful. Later on, Alan has a confrontation with Tug and knocks him down. Tug yells at Soonie and threatens Alan from a jail cell. They all go back to the store, and he wonders how he ever forgot about Soonie. When Mrs. Hennessy sees Alan sorting through stuff in the store, she says to him, "You're not going to sell the store, and you saved Ben's life." Alan calls Nick Conti. Roscoe is now actively looking for him. Soonie tells Alan how she met Tug at one of the airbase dances. Alan says he's going to have to get cash to make the store work. Tug is making trouble and threatening to throw them out of the house. Alan knows that if he sells off his assets, he might get enough to start the project off the ground. But the main thing is to get the train to stop at the town station. Money from the cars and boat sales are wired into Kenny's bank. It is at that time that two well-dressed men enter Nick's office in November looking for Alan. Alan goes to the townspeople about revitalizing the entire town. Websites are needed to get people into the area. At the same time, Soonie is meeting with Charlie McGowan to get a restraining order against Tug. Alan tells everyone that trains need to be bringing people to the inns and historic sites in the town. He said there has to be a website for the entire town. It's a matter of bringing back the flavor before the plant moved out of town. His plans for the general store should springboard out, and every building can be used in this revitalization effort. Every building has a history, and it's important to share that history and heritage. But again, they have to fix up the station and convince the train to stop there. Everyone is out there at 8 a.m. sharp. Soonie ends up getting a restraining order against Tug, and Alan's website goes live. Materials for the station are put on the dock at the general store. The station lot needs to be paved, there's a leaky roof, but he can envision people arriving from distant places. Brochures need to be printed up and reservations made in the hotel. Jacob, smoking his cherry tobacco pipe, walks around the inside of the station with Alan. Alan's worried about an additional payment by Nick to Roscoe. They talk about Pop Ridden, the local hardware guy, donating paint to the station. It's at that time Soonie's house is on fire. Later, a propane tank left by Tug explodes, and Alan saves Tommy Baines' life under the porch before the blast. He said that he'll run the store while she relaxes. Nick Conti is called the pharmacy. Somebody broke into his office and stole Alan's file with everything in it. Now they may know he's in Barclay, Idaho. The entire town buys things from Benson's and brings clothes to Soonie and her family. Back at the store in the next few days, the clocks and the furniture are brought to the store by Alan. Amanda is so upset about what her father has done, but Alan talks to her and reassures her with a hug. At this time, there have been no calls about the town's website. Tug has been apprehended in Washington State. Soonie asked Alan to accompany her over to the island for the weekend. There's a Victrola in the cabin. He plays the record, and they both talk about how little things in your life can change everything in the future. He has to convince the people to come up to Barclay, Idaho. They finish their pancakes in the morning and walk along the glistening snow. The fireplace smoke fills the woods. Kenny is on his way over to the island, and Alan thinks there's something wrong again. However, he has good news. Aunt Amanda's store is buzzing with people. Alan and Soonie head over to the store. Alan sells a Victrola, and the store is packed with people all day long who have seen his ad on the website. Soonie makes them dinner later, and he meets Jacob at the station to talk about the revitalization. As Jacob leaves, Roscoe actually shows up. He has to the 22nd to pay in full. Nick Conti makes a deal for Alan with Lamberts. Alan tries to get a loan application with Kenny but is unsuccessful. Soonie meets with McGowan to try and get Tug out of her life. Tom Baines, jogging down the sidewalk, thanks Alan for saving his life back at the fire. He and Soonie are now actively getting furniture and other antiques from Connerville. Roscoe leaves another reminder message.
Just a reminder, Sacket. 1 week left. Call in your chips.
Alan is waiting on the customers, but 12:30 on the 22nd, just 5 days away, is constantly on his mind. The furniture is selling. They're stocking goods from around the country. As he gets a call from Nick tells him to disappear immediately. He and Soonie sit on the porch swing on a starry night, and Soonie proclaims to him, "This is the one place on earth where you can get peace." Alan figures he'll give his historic Barclay presentation whether or not he's going to be there in the future. He makes plans later to leave on a plane to Texas on Wednesday night. He's already added to the website, and he tells people why come to Barclay, Idaho, as he describes the area and the historic significance and shows pamphlets that he's printed up. Even Amanda has been rallied by Alan to make a presentation about the historic aspect of Barclay, Idaho. Jacob, however, has overheard Roscoe at the station. Soonie knows that there's something wrong. On the 22nd, he walks down Main Street to meet Roscoe. Roscoe and 3 well-dressed men are down the end of the street. They are armed and dangerous and want their money. The whole town converges on Main Street from different areas. Soonie locks Alan's right elbow. Roscoe and the 3 men draw their guns, but the townspeople cock their rifles, and Kenny Baines proposes a deal. Roscoe is intimidated by the overwhelming support and signs the agreement. The town will help Alan pay off his debts as the town gets wealthy again. And just before the end of the book, news comes in that the train has indeed agreed to stop at Barclay, Idaho, bringing people in from around the world. Soonie says, "Alan Sackett, welcome home. Now get to work."